Now entering the squared circle pit, future WWE Hall of Famer, Bubba Ray Dudley. Does it feel good to hear that? A future Hall of Famer? Is it something you always knew would happen?
Well, if you're going to announce it, you got to do it the right way, like king of the mosh pit. I mean, when you have a guy like Zakk Wylde who comes to you after he writes his first book and he says, I want you to write the chapter on how to survive the mosh pit, you got to give me a much better introduction.
All right,
than that, bro.
let me do a second take then. All right, now entering the squared circle pit, not only is he one half of the most decorated tag team in professional wrestling history, not only is he a future WWE Hall of Famer, he is the king of the mosh pit, King Bubba Ray Dudley.
That's a lot better. And let me tell you something. If you've ever seen me go, I'm like, when I go to like a Pretty Boy Floyd concert or a Poison or a Cinderella show, I kick ass in the mosh pit.
You bring the heat. Now, are you doing any? Are you doing a thrash? Are you doing something with your arms? What are your moves?
I don't even know what I do. I just go crazy.
Well,
my first mosh pit was an Anthrax show at L'Amour.
Nice. I was going to ask.
That's a pretty good way to start, huh?
Yeah, you grew up in New York, right? You grew up in Queens?
Yep.
And so L'Amour is here in Brooklyn, where I was born and raised. And so that was your first show. How old were you?
I don't even remember. I was young. I had to be like 15, 16.
Nice. And so did your passion for metal come first or pro wrestling? Or was it a one and the same?
My passion for pro wrestling was first. Like, I remember as a kid in the late 70s, early 80s, growing up and watching, the WWF back then and watching tag team wrestling like Gurria and Martel versus Fuji and Saito. And I loved it from day one. And then shortly after that, I bought a Kiss Live 2. Did I say a Kiss Live 2? Kiss Alive 2. That's what happens when you get
you bought a Kiss
too many times. Yeah, I bought a Kiss Alive. Yeah, I bought a Kiss Alive 2, and that's where my love with rock and roll began.
Right.
Like many others, though, so many other people have that same story. It's like you bought Kiss Alive 2, and you opened up the double LP set, and you're just like, whoa, what is this? It was the coolest thing ever.
Right. Like at that moment, Kiss were like the Hulk Hogan or the Bruno Sammartino of the rock world. They're the thing that drew everybody in to get into it. And so that was your gateway. So you went from Kiss, and then how did you get into the thrash stuff like Anthrax?
Oh, just because it was going on and it was local, and L'Amour was the place to be. I had gone to L'Amour as a kid. I had been to CBGB's. Actually, there was a place out in Deer Park, Long Island, called Sparks. That was a cool rock and roll club. There was also Sundance in Huntington or Bayshore or something like that, where I saw a lot of cool gigs. So I really enjoyed going to the smaller places and seeing the bands when they came through.
Yeah, and I feel New York at that time was a great place for rock. There was a great rock scene. There was a lot of stuff happening. I mean, even outside of CBGB's, there was a lot of metal stuff, like with L'Amour and all these other venues you're talking about.
And they were all great places to go to.
What were some of your most memorable local shows that you went to?
Well, I think the most memorable one, I always get the date wrong, and I don't know why I screw this up, but I was at the Ritz in 87 for Guns N' Roses. Was it 87 or 88?
I'll look it up right now.
I think it was 87. And that Ritz show in New York City was like one of the most memorable Guns N' Roses shows ever. And I was there.
It was 88.
Yeah, there you go, 88. But before that even happened in like 1986, I remember being on vacation with my parents, and we did like a drive from San Francisco to San Diego, and I was so excited because we were going to spend the night in LA. And I begged my parents to let me go out And I remember looking at this poster in front of the Roxy, and Faster Pussycat and Guns N' Roses were playing.
Oh wow!
And I got to see them before they were anybody. This is when Axl was still teasing his hair.
You saw Guns N' Roses on their home turf before anyone knew who they were. That was pretty wild.
Yep.
And I feel like that strip, it was like it was the underground. It was where the bands kind of broke through to the mainstream.
There's no doubt. What a place to go. And anytime I'm back in LA, I always love just head into that section of West Hollywood. You just give me the Rainbow, you give me the Saddle Ranch, you give me the Roxy, and I'm pretty much good to go. And the whiskey, of course.
Of course, yeah. And with the Rainbow, back in the day, or up until a few years ago, you would always just see Lemmy there in his spot playing the poker machine. That was just his hang. Nobody bothered him. Everyone knew he was there. Just his spot. And that I thought was the coolest thing.
Seeing Lemmy at the Rainbow, it just became, like, not old hat, because you can't say, seeing Lemmy gets old. But, yeah, he was always there. And one of my favorite stories about Lemmy is one night, myself, Lemmy, and Paul Gargano, who I'm sure you know, who is the editor of Metal Edge magazine, we went to go see Steel Panther at the House of Blues out there. I'm almost positive it was Steel Panther. And It was about 2:00 in the morning, and we're filing out of the place. And me, Lemmy, and Paul Gargano are sitting on a bench outside the House of Blues. Gargano is throwing up all over himself with his head down and like a pile of his own puke. And Lemmy just kind of looks over at me and he goes, "So, Bubba, what did you think about that second song I wrote for Triple H?" And I was trying to tell Lemmy in the nicest way that, well, because I kind of like the first one better. And he goes, "It's okay, don't worry, I know. The first one I wrote was better." So getting drunk with Lemmy, talking about Triple H's theme music while Gargano puked all over himself is my favorite Sunset Strip story.
That's like one of those moments where you find yourself outside of yourself, like, what is going on? How am I?
It was a good night.
And I feel like there's a lot of metalheads that are wrestling fans, which is what I found doing this podcast, interviewing a bunch of metal musicians. And on my first show, you brought him up, I had Zakk Wylde, who I was so impressed at, like, what a big wrestling fan he was. I was completely taken aback. And he dropped your name multiple times as a very good friend. And I was curious, how did you meet Zakk Wylde?
First time I met Zakk, I think, was in catering at a WWE show in LA or California somewhere. I just remember walking in one day and there was Zakk, and this is early Black Label. So this is, post Ozzy, early Black Label, where Zakk was still cleanly shaven. His blonde hair was still flowing and beautiful, and he was smooth and pretty, but he was wearing the jeans, the boots, and, the Black Label jacket.
Right.
So he was right in the middle of his transitional phase, and I believe that he had known Austin and Jericho, and I just got introduced to him, and, we hit it off. And, he's such a huge wrestling fan, myself, Jericho, Austin, all big rock and roll fans. So, we just started talking, and we always enjoyed conversating with each other. And, he's a big sports fan. I was a big sports fan. We stayed in contact over the years. And, yeah, Zakk's, he's salt of the earth. He's one of the greatest guitar players,
absolutely,
that'll ever, string up a fiddle. And he's just he's a good brother and a good friend.
Yeah, and so you mentioned you talked to Austin and Jericho. Do you have like a crew of wrestlers that you talk metal with? Do you have like a group text or whatever and just talk about bands or songs that you hear?
Actually, yes, I do have a group text with me, Jericho, and Dolph Ziggler. And
Oh,
we're
that's
like a
awesome.
bunch of little kids who just text about rock and roll at all times. Like, we never talk about wrestling. We don't talk about anything else than rock and roll. Normally, we're talking about, who's out on tour or what cover bands we saw who are trying to, play with, not even cover bands, like what version of Rat did you go see
Right.
tonight?
Which LA Guns were you
So,
seeing? Which,
yeah, yeah,
which version of
exactly.
LA Guns
Did
is
you
out
see
there?
LA Guns with Phil Lewis or without him? So yeah, that's my clique of rock and roll friends.
That's cool. And I think like I remember seeing a photo or something of you, Jericho, and maybe Paul Heyman at an ACDC show. Does that ring a bell? Are you guys? Were you
Yeah, I
guys?
was at I was at an ACDC show with some friends of mine and my girl Velvet Sky, and we were having a great time. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Jericho texted me and he goes, "What section are you in?" And I texted him back. I'm like, "I'm over here," and he wound up being like 5 seats away from me. We just happened to be in the exact same spot. And he came, and Jericho and Paul came and hung out with us for the rest of the night. We watched the show together, and that's when Axel was fronting ACDC.
Mhm.
I thought it was a phenomenal show. I loved it, and I'm excited to hear that they're going to be going back out again and possibly doing another album.
Yeah, when I first heard, I'm sure this was a lot of people's reaction was kind of like, oh no, this won't. There's no way this will work. But then you watch some of the bootlegs and you go see them live, and it completely works. It worked great. I felt.
The part that I loved about it is, I mean, I'm a huge ACDC fan. I mean, to me, ACDC is probably the greatest rock and roll band ever. That's just my opinion. Um,
Yeah, they're
and
undeniable.
obviously obviously Brian Johnson is great, but I was always a Bon Scott fan. I mean, if you got to give me, if I only had to listen to Power Age for the rest of my life, I'd be a happy guy. So, not being able to see Bon perform, obviously, Axel was by far the closest thing because he could sing songs that Brian just could never pull off, and to hear him sing Riff Raff and songs like that live, for me it was really cool.
That's cool. Yeah, I totally get what you're saying, and it's a real testament to ACDC because I kind of feel like they're almost two different bands with the two different vocalists because of what they bring to the table, and both in their own ways incredible and like change the game.
Yeah. So I'm excited to see what it will be like. I'm even more. I would love to be a fly on the wall talking about ACDC, no pun intended, to see the business that actually goes into this. Like, will Angus actually collaborate with Axel, or will this just be business as usual for ACDC, where Angus will write everything and then just hand it off to Axel and tell him, sing the songs that we wrote.
Right, and with Axel, the guy's known for his ego, but at the same time, he has such a respect for what ACDC has done and what Angus has done that you could sort of see him being completely cool with that. And in a way, it's kind of a load off his back because he doesn't have to. He doesn't have the pressure of having to follow up, the lyrics and the performance and everything, and he just has to worry about the delivery.
I think that's such a testament to how big of a rock and roll machine and what kind of a band ACDC really are. I mean, nobody could keep Axel in check. Not his own management company, his own record company, his own bandmates. Nobody except for Angus and the ACDC machine. I mean, they never went on late. And what amazed me about watching ACDC and Axel live was Axel knew his role. He knows that it's the Angus show. And, Axl was comfortable hanging out in the background and singing the lyrics. And, he came to the front of the stage when he needed to, but Axl didn't need to be, nor did it look like he wanted to be the star of the show. He looked like that kid that was just happy to be there. And to me, that was cool.
Yeah, I think that's the coolest part of it is you could see the fan in Axl Rose kind of flipping out at the moment himself that he's up there with AC/DC.
Yes, I totally agree.
That's awesome. And, I was curious, there had to be a moment where you were listening to a song and being like, this would be such a great entrance theme. Like, have you ever thought of like, what if there was no such licensing holdups, what a great entrance theme for you would be?
I mean, there are so many. I mean, you could probably pick out so many different AC/DC riffs, but I think if you just take the beginning of Dirty Deeds and loop it, it's incredible entrance music.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
true.
how do you not get up on your feet and pump your fists, to the opening riffs of Dirty Deeds? So just imagine looping that.
Yeah, and even if you're not paying attention, you're gonna catch yourself headbanging because it's such an infectious earworm of a riff.
And one of the best opening songs that I ever heard AC/DC perform, and I believe this is off of the live version of If You Want Blood, was Riff Raff live. I mean, they hit the stage, and they just sound so incredible. And that first song just grabs you by the throat, and they never let you go. And, that's the thing about AC/DC. Sometimes I hear there are songs from 40 years ago, and I feel like I'm listening for the first time. I just never get bored of listening to them.
Yeah, you just get caught up in the movement of the song, and you're just right back in it. And of course, and when you talk about AC/DC, like my mind wanders, of course, to Balls Mahoney and Big Balls in that entrance. And one thing I feel that ECW probably doesn't get credit for is how many people it exposed to like really good hard rock and heavy metal, because the entrances were all really, really great songs. And it was such a, like ECW was like the heavy metal of pro wrestling. It was like it was like the ECW arena, I feel, was akin to Lemoore in that it was just this, place where you had to know about it to know that this was the show.
Music was such an integral part of ECW, and Paul had a big set of balls for just using the songs and never getting permission for it. I mean, every year we would do a show called the November to Remember, and he would make his own video packages to sum up our storylines to the actual video of November Rain.
That's right.
And think of Sandman's music, some of the most memorable entrance music in the history of pro wrestling. Enter Sandman. The Dudleys used to use Highway to Hell. Shane Douglas, Bam Bam Bigelow used to use The Zoo by the Scorpions.
That's right.
Taz was using War Machine by by
Kiss. Yeah, and Shane Douglas was using Deep Purple, I think.
Yeah, I mean, so many great songs from so many great hard rock and metal bands, and the music was so important to ECW, and until today, I think entrance music is, incredibly important because it primes the people for what they're about to see. And when me and Devon were in WWE, we got to use Power Man 5000's song, Bombshell.
Right.
Which was a pretty cool song, and got those people up and pumping their fists. So,
yeah, and it was the perfect song for you. Yeah, for you guys, it really spoke to your characters, and I feel like with the entrance music, like it's the first few bars are what really make a great entrance song, because as soon as you recognize what's happening, people are going to go nuts and react really big, as opposed to if it's a fade.
From the moment you hear it, whether it's music or whether it's a sound, there's no more memorable sound than Austin's glass breaking.
Right.
And it's just the shattering of the glass, but it almost feels like the first note to a song. You hear it, and you're immediately on your feet.
Right. Yeah, the crowd is on their feet before the first riff already, because they already know what's what's happening. And with you guys, you had the bomb explosion, and then the pyro going off, and it was immediately people knew what was up.
Great stuff. I wish there was more legitimate entrance music in pro wrestling.
I always have this thing of like a wrestling show and a metal concert are kind of paced the same way, where you kind of put you know something really exciting up front, slow it down a little, and then bring everyone back up at the end with like the big stuff. I feel like that's a great concert and that's a great wrestling show. Would you agree with this theory of mine?
I do. I just don't agree with the slowing down. I don't like a rock and roll show or a wrestling show to ever slow down. I believe from the minute you open a show, you press the gas pedal as hard as you can and you keep going until you can't go no more. And I don't like having those dips and lulls. I don't ever want to have a dip or a lull in my match, and I don't want it in my rock and roll concert. I don't want a strategically placed bad song just to bring me down. I want to just keep going up, up, up.
You don't want like a power ballad thrown in there to slow things down a little bit?
Not unless that power ballad can keep me going as much as the hard rockers, you know? If Motley Crue plays Home Sweet Home, you know, nobody's taking a piss break during, you know, Home Sweet Home, because that ballad is as good as, you know, Live Wire or Kickstart My Heart or Red Hot.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't want any dips in my show. And, you know, me and Devon used to pattern our wrestling matches after a Kiss concert. We tried to open up with Detroit Rock City, go into Shout It Out Loud, and finish with Rock and Roll All Night every single night we performed. And that's my recipe for a great wrestling match.
I love that. I love that comparison. That's awesome. And of course, your Rock and Roll All Night is the tables. And I was like, I know, like the table, like it got me to think, like, how did the table become a weapon? And I'm guessing it's the announce table that was there, right? That's how it initially, like, the table was introduced to wrestling, like storylines or whatever.
Well, the first time I believe that a table was actually used is when we saw Terry Funk pile drive Ric Flair on top of a table at an NWA show back in the day.
Yeah. But that was the announce table. Wasn't that the announce table though? That he was like.
Yeah, that was the announce table that was at ringside. Yeah.
Right. Okay, yeah, they didn't go through it. Yeah, that was like the first usage of the table.
And that was just called on the fly. You know, Funk just grabbed Flair and just said, "Oh, don't worry about it, Ricky. I got you, son. Just come with me." And then, you know, pile drives him, you know, onto a freaking table. So, and then, you know, many years later, I believe we saw Sabu start to put people through tables or put himself through a table to end a match. Like, Sabu was just throwing his body all over the damn place, crashing and burning through tables. And then when ECW was born, a lot of different people were using tables. Sabu was using them. A tag team called the Public Enemy was using them. So
of course.
It wasn't really unique to any one act. It was part of the staple of ECW. When me and Devon had gotten together, you know, we occasionally used tables, just like we occasionally used chairs or any other weapon in ECW. But it wasn't until, you know, WWE, where one night I just decided to push Devon and say, "Devon, get the tables." And it just caught on like wildfire after that.
Right. It just the luck of the just spontaneity, and you just kept doing it, and now it's a signature phrase. I mean, that's how most great things happen.
Listen, Devon, get the tables was off the top of my head, just like Austin 316 means I just whooped your ass. Like it was off the top of Steve's head.
Right.
There was no planning going into those lines.
And it's crazy now, 20 years later, I feel tables are like the most popular weapon that wrestlers can use. It could be I could be watching like a crazy weapons match. They got chairs, the kendo sticks, everything. Even after they're throwing everything around, people then still are chanting, "We want tables," no matter what. And I feel the Dudleys are a big reason for that.
There's no doubt. You never hear people chanting, "We want chairs," or "We want ladders," or "We want thumbtacks." You always hear them chanting, "We want tables." And that's pretty cool because, that's like a little piece of the wrestling history that me and Devon helped to carve out. And when we went back to WWE in 2015, a couple of the guys told us that in our 10-year absence from WWE, whenever the guys would use a table, they would always refer to it as a Dudley table. So they'd say to it, "Hey, we're going to pull out a Dudley table and, do this." And that's how it was differentiated from the announce table or any other table. So
that's
always
amazing.
Cool to hear stories like that.
Yeah, you guys are forever intertwined with a big weapon in pro wrestling. A big,
Thank God for that piece of furniture, because if we had to rely on our wrestling ability, we'd be screwed.
Well, good thing it's a table and not thumbtacks. That would be a very painful experience every time you had to pull those out, even if you're not taking.
One time we actually set up a table, put thumbtacks all over it, and then set the table on fire and powerbomb Balls Mahoney through it. That what we didn't realize is that all the thumbtacks would go flying into the air while they were lit on fire. So that created for an interesting scenario post-match.
I do remember that series of matches you guys had with like Balls and Axel Rotten, and it seemed like every match, almost every, like there was a series of like 5 or 6 matches where there was at least a burning table spot, and it was to me that was the like that point with like the violence you guys were doing, and then the like technical stuff that RVD and Jerry Lynn was doing. It was like the most well-rounded wrestling show you can get. It was like a buffet of every style of wrestling you could ever want out of a show. And that was the beauty of ECW, man. We always gave you a little bit of everything. And just like people chant, "We want tables," people still chant ECW to this day. Nobody's chanting WCW. Nobody's chanting NWA. Nobody's chanting AWA. 20 some odd years later, they still chant ECW. And there's a reason why. And I've said it a couple of times. ECW was the Napster of the wrestling business. Mm-hmm.
Napster went out of business, but it revolutionized the way we listen to music. ECW went out of business, but it revolutionized professional wrestling and brought you this adult-oriented, in-your-face brand of pro wrestling that slowly turned into the Attitude Era.
Yeah, I think what separated ECW from anything else was they kind of played like the audience was in on it. You guys, like, it was like a wink and a nod, like we're all on the same page. Which I think with WWE and WCW at the time, they always kind of talked down to you and were like shilling. Whereas ECW was like your buddy, like, "Hey, come here, check this out."
The fan base in ECW and the fans that came to each and every ECW show were just as important to the show as the wrestlers and the show itself, because they truly were a part of the company. They were so loyal, so dedicated. They told you when they loved something, and they let you know when they hated it. Listen, if an ECW crowd didn't respect you or didn't like you, they would stand up and turn their backs to the ring. Nothing says F you more than a fan turning their back to a ring. And you had to earn the respect of an ECW crowd.
Yeah, and I feel like these are people who have seen wrestling. They you can't pull one over on them. You can't. It's got to be something unique. And with the chanting, I feel that's one of ECW's biggest legacies. First of all, ECW is where the woo started with the chops, with Ric Flair chops. And I feel like ECW's kind of birthed, like, how there's the the Raw after WrestleMania, and everyone's doing the crazy chants. I feel like that's, in my head, it feels like it's a crowd who watched like ECW One Night Stand and wants to be like that kind of crowd. Would that be fair to say?
There's no doubt. All of these crowds today, these crowds of today are trying to be, and when I say trying to be, I don't mean it in a negative way. They're trying to emulate the fun.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, they're emulating the fun that an ECW crowd used to have. Because, you know, if you went to a WWF show back in the day, you know, you sat on that other side of the guardrail and you just kind of watched the show. If you went to an NWA show back in the day, you sat on that other side of the guardrail and you watched the show. The ECW show, you felt like you were a part of the action. And I'm very proud to say that many a night people jumped over those guardrails to try to get at me and Devon, and we knocked them the fuck out.
See, it's like you wore many hats, because not only were you a professional wrestler, I know you were involved a little bit with the behind the scenes stuff of like organizing the shows, but you were also like an insult comedian most nights. Really getting to some of these
insults, yes. Comedy, I don't know about that.
Well, it was funny to the people watching at home, not necessarily to the people in the crowd.
Yes, that's true.
And but I thought like that was the interesting part of ECW too, was that if you wanted to put in the effort, you could kind of, like, I'm sure you got quite an education on behind the scenes of putting on a show and just promoting a show, and that's the same if it's wrestling or music. That's just like putting on entertainment.
Yeah, I give Paul all the credit in the world, because at one point when Todd Gordon had left the company, there was a huge void to fill. You know, Paul didn't have anybody booking the towns or, you know, getting the buildings or taking care of all of the responsibilities that Todd had. And I kind of told Paul, hey, man, I'll do it. And he goes, well, what experience do you have? I go, none. I said, but I know I can pull it off. So, you know, I'm proud to say that I was the guy, you know, who was, you know, putting the dates together and booking the towns and negotiating the buildings and anything that went on with ECW from like 97, late 97 to late 99, when it came to the product, other than the booking of the show or the merchandising, was all of my responsibility. And I got a hell of an education outside of the ring, which, you know, I can take with me to this day. And, you know, when my in-ring career is, you know, over, which it basically is now, I'm, you know, utilizing those talents to help out other companies such as the Ring of Honor.
That's awesome. Yeah. So like, that's a lot of responsibilities that you would find in the metal world as well. Like, it sounds like you were the booking agent, the tour manager, just all the logistical stuff. And that's great that, it's something you can keep doing when you're not in the ring. I think that's awesome.
Yes, and it's a great way to continue to earn a living in the wrestling business despite not being in the ring anymore.
And if you touched on it earlier a little bit, but I want to ask you what it was like to be a part of what I consider the most metal moment in professional wrestling history, which was the One Night Stand at Hammerstein, where Sandman came out to Metallica, and bless Vince McMahon for paying for the pay-per-view rights for Enter Sandman, and you couldn't even hear the song because every person in the crowd was singing Enter Sandman, and it was such a moment.
The backstory to that is pretty interesting. In 2004, maybe late 2004, me and my big fat friend Tommy Dreamer were driving down the road, and I remember saying to him, I go, Tommy, I would give my left nut to be standing in the middle of the ring again just to hear Sandman's entrance play one more time. Because me and Devon would, you know, back in the day, we'd go out there and rile the people up, and then Tommy and the Sandman would hit the ring to Enter Sandman, and, you know, the shit was on. And I just knew that if we could ever pull that off one more time, how cool it would be. And all credit to Vince. Vince listened. Rob Van Dam went to Vince McMahon and said, listen, ECW still has legs, and we have to do something with it. And Vince listened to Rob, and I'll never forget, Vince called me and Devon into his office one day, and he said, what do you think about bringing back ECW? And, we told him all of, the reasons we thought it would be a great idea. And, then Dreamer and Heyman, wrote the show, or, Dreamer wrote the majority of the show, I believe. And, it happened. And it was an incredible night in the history of wrestling. And in my opinion, the greatest entrance in the history of pro wrestling. You can't tell me that anything tops it. Yeah, Undertaker might have a more spectacular entrance, and people may pop louder on the glass breaking, but you will never find as emotional of a moment as you will the night of One Night Stand, where the Sandman makes his entrance, and 4,000 people in unison are singing "Enter Sandman."
You're right, because obviously you're right. You were there, but it's the people singing it. It wasn't just singing a Metallica song. It was just recapturing that moment of the fun of an ECW show, and that's what ECW was. Like you said, it was just fun, just pure fun.
It really was, and I challenge anybody to find me another entrance that was as fan interactive as the Sandman's and as much fun.
Yeah, like he went through essentially the entire crowd. He started up in the balcony and slowly, like the whole song played, I feel, before he even got into the ring. And I, just talking about it right now, I'm genuinely just getting the exact same chills I had watching it. I threw like a big party, and I remember there was a person there who wasn't really a wrestling fan, just came to hang out. And even like he couldn't even deny what a crazy moment that particular moment was about. It was like, I don't want to like, it was just the most, everyone was in unison. Everyone was on the same page. It was amazing. But anyway,
there's no words. Yeah. So it was definitely a cool moment.
Cool, man. Well, Bubba, thank you so much for taking some time. I know you're a busy guy, for hanging out, talking to me about some heavy metal, some pro wrestling. Are there any particular songs you're currently jamming? Anything on your playlist that you remember the last thing that you were just like rocking out hard to?
I got to tell you, man, nothing new. Nothing new really, does it for me, unfortunately. I know everybody was busting Gene Simmons' balls, 5 or 6 years ago, or however long it was, when he said rock and roll is dead. But, you tell me, man, rock and roll is your business. Heavy metal is your business. What band has come out in the past 5 to 10 years that we're going to be talking about in the next 10 to 20 years?
That's a great question. And I think the thing is, I don't think there will ever be a band that can get that big where everybody's talking about them, but I feel like there will, like, the last few big bands, I talk about this with my friends all the time. It's like, who are they? Like, who's like the next Metallica? And even that, you think, like, is it Slipknot? Is it Avenged Sevenfold? Even those bands, they've been around now for 20 years and they're never going to get that big. So I don't know who's the next big band, but if you do a little digging, there's plenty of small bands.
Yeah, but but small, like I said earlier, sometimes I'll put on an AC/DC song, like If You Want Blood, or Sin City, songs from so long ago that I feel like it's the first time I'm hearing them, and I can't tell you the last time I listened to new music that really, really drove me the way an AC/DC song, or a Motley Crue song, or a Kiss song, or a Metallica song, or a Pantera song does. Mm-hmm. And I'm begging for somebody, or a Guns N' Roses song. The list goes on and on. Who is the next Eddie Van Halen? Where is the next Zakk Wylde? Where's the next Tommy Lee? Where's the next David Lee Roth? Where's the next Kiss? Where's the next entertaining band? You know?
Yeah.
Where's the next rock and roll show coming from?
There's a absolute shortage of rock and roll bands. I'll absolutely agree with you. They're just hard rock bands to bring people into the scene to like explore and get into the heavier stuff, which won't ever hit the mainstream like a great hard rock band would.
And that's what I think Gene meant when he said rock and roll is dead. I think what he was trying to say is there's nobody to pick up where we're going to leave off. Because when you think about it, when Motley's done like they are, and Kiss is done, and Metallica's done, and Van Halen's done, and Ozzy's done. I mean, these guys are all in their 60s and their 70s when AC/DC's done. Who's taking over?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
nobody.
You know, so exactly, and that's the sad part. That's why I continue to listen to the same songs I've been listening to on my iPod. My friends always, they bust my balls. They go, you got your top 24 songs and that's all you listen to. I said, until somebody can put, give me something good enough to listen to be that 25th song, I'll stick to what I got.
There you go. Everyone listens to music at their own pace. So that's the pace that you pick. Awesome, man. Well, Bubba, I want to, of course, mention you are on Busted Open Radio, which is weekdays on Sirius XM Rush, which is awesome. You are doing you're getting into the radio game, using your voice a little more. Less, you don't got to take any bumps on the radio.
No bumps on the radio, but I am putting some massive strain on my vocal cords lately.
Interesting. Of course.
All this talking, it feels like my throat is taking bumps.
And of course, the WWE Hall of Fame, huge congratulations, much deserved for yourself and Devon. And the Hall of Fame is always one of the best nights of the year when everyone just has some fun. It's another very fun night.
It definitely is, and people are really excited for me and Devon, and we appreciate that, and me and Devon in our own right, we're excited. I think I'm excited for different reasons. We've been here talking a little bit about ECW, and I'm most proud of the fact that me and Devon are the first original ECW act to be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. And I'm also really proud of the fact that at the end of the day, me and Devon did it, our way. There's two versions of the song My Way. There's the Frank Sinatra version, and there's the Sid Vicious and the Sex Pistols version. And,
right.
Me and Devon definitely did it the Sid Vicious and the Sex Pistols version way. Me and Devon were never supposed to be successful, but we knew we had something special the first night we ever stepped in a ring together. And we went out there and we truly did it our way, and we're proud to say that we conquered the world of tag team wrestling. And much like Gene said, rock and roll is dead. Me and Devon are waiting for the next tag team to come around and even remotely challenge the lineage of tag team championships that we have won all over the world. And I don't say that out of ego. I say that out of fact.
And that is a challenge. I'm sure a team like the Young Bucks might dispute that challenge, but they still have some catching up to do.
They can't dispute shit. But if there's one team on the planet right now that I really enjoy watching, it's the Bucks, because I've seen them evolve to these two scared little kids who were terrified to even say hello to you, to the best tag team on the planet today, who are doing it their way. And that's why I'm happy for them and why I'm proud of them, because they are staying true to themselves. They're doing it their way. They're one of the most organic, talked about acts on the planet, and they're making a boatload of money.
One final question before I let you go. What is the ultimate dream opponent for the Dudleys?
It's easy. I've been asked that question a million times. You really aren't,
All right, let me try. A modern. You're gonna say. I know what you're gonna say. You're gonna say the Road Warriors.
Well,
right?
yeah, that's the match that everybody, would have liked to have seen happen, the Dudleys
Yeah.
versus the Road Warriors. I can tell you right now, it would not have been nearly as good as the Dudleys versus the Hardys or the Dudleys versus Edge and Christian or, any of the other teams we worked with. But just for the sheer, I guess, history of both teams, the Dudleys versus the Road Warriors would have been some great fantasy warfare. And me and Devon admit to this day, the Road Warriors are the greatest tag team of all time. There's no doubt about it. Me and Devon are the most successful tag team of all time. We're the most decorated tag team of all time. And we have the greatest tag team finishing move of all time in the Dudley Death Drop. But the Road Warriors were the greatest because the Road Warriors could main event every town every night and sell the place out. And that's what made them the greatest.
And also because their entrance theme was Black Sabbath, Iron Man. All ties together.
How bad? The most probably the most badass entrance music ever.
Absolutely, without question. Awesome. Well, this was great, Bubba. Thank you again so much. Congratulations on all the accolades, and I look forward to hearing more of your voice, your wonderful, charming voice on Busted Open Radio.
The smooth, sultry sounds of my sandpapery voice.